You're listening to the extended version of the MarkWHO77's Universe podcast.
MarkWHO77 Universe.
Hi, this is Cindy Morgan, but you probably know me as Yori in Tron or Lacey Underall in Caddyshack. And you're listening to MarkWHO77.
Welcome to MarkWHO77's Universe here on Subspace Radio. I'm your host, Mark Baumgarten. Well, we hope you had a happy Father's Day for all you fathers out there. For all you kids, hope you gave your fathers a good present. Anyway, I gave the team a week off, but that doesn't mean you don't get a new episode. You totally get a new episode. MarkWHO77 and The77 Publications, a British comic company, are joining forces and now have a web interview show on the 77 Productions YouTube channel, where you can watch and listen to interviews with British comic creators who have some connection with the 77. This week we are going to do a simulcast of an episode that came out about 2 weeks ago, an interview with Andrew Sawyers. Andrew Sawyers is an artist who does some really great work. So it's myself, Mark Baumgarten, and Vicky, Jakubowski, and the 77 Publications, Ben Cullis, interviewing Andrew Sawyers. Ben, do you want to do an introduction?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with Andrew Sawyers for 3 years now. He's been a stalwart with us. He's done several strips. At the moment, he's going to be completing Silver Jubilee. And he previously did The Cell with Bambos Giorgio. He's a go-to guy, absolutely. Full of energy, full of ideas, unique drawing style. He'll be showing us some of his work later. And he's just a fabulous, fabulous person as well. Really looking forward to chatting to him tonight.
Well, we're looking forward to chatting to him too, and we're letting the audience, hopefully you're looking forward to it, to see and hear what Andrew has to say. And now, let's introduce the man himself, Andrew Sawyers. Welcome, Andy. How you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Sun's shining. I'm busy at the drawing board. I've got a day off, and not long back from Lawless. So, yeah, in good spirits. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You know, you just brought up Lawless. Let's talk Lawless. How did it go?
In a word, absolutely excellent. It's very well organized, absolutely fantastic staffing, and the attendees are probably some of the best in the UK. They're real diehard enthusiasts, not just the British comics, but the whole comics in general. It's a great venue. Bristol's a lovely location. And despite being very busy, it's a real tough one because you've got to have your work head on. But it's still a highly enjoyable event to do.
So Andrew, we started with that question, but really we should have started with the question we ask everybody at the beginning of MarkWHO77. It is a question that's probably the hardest question we're going to ask you. Who is Andrew Sawyers?
Andy Sawyers, me, is just a regular guy who I think it all comes back to 2000 AD, to coin a phrase. I remember very specifically in 1981, Prog 236, and as soon as I saw that Bolland cover, the McMahon interiors, like all children, I was already drawing, but it inspired me on that sort of descent into comics. And then obviously, you know, despite sort of ducking out for 25 years, which is a long story, yeah, I've always sort of been into 2000 AD. But yeah, I'm a sort of a part-time illustrator, and you know, a family man, and just really enjoyed being able to contribute to the medium. I think that probably sort of sums me up pretty well. I absolutely love to draw.
Excellent.
It's great that I've been able to turn it into a vocation to a degree, but I would draw or illustrate for pleasure regardless. It's very, very cathartic, and I enjoy the fact it brings other people reward, whatever you do. It's mind-blowing to see people take such great enjoyment from it, and I feel very lucky. Obviously the 77 have been a huge part of that, and it's an incredible opportunity. It's been non-stop for the last 3 years since I returned to art, to illustrating.
What comics did you read while growing up? What did you
So
love?
predominantly 2000 AD.
Okay.
But then this is where it gets interesting, is because I was already picking up before the British invasion happened.
Mm-hmm.
I could see the European influence on 2000 AD artists. So sort of like the whole, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but the band dessinée kind of thing, heavy metal or metal hurlant. You could see that back influence in 2000 AD. And then I could also see a lot of American artists. They weren't lifting directly from 2000 AD, but you could see American comics getting darker. And I think particularly around the latter years of senior school, stuff like The Killing Joke came out, The Watchmen, and Frank Miller's Dark Knight. And that's when I really started to sort of pay attention to American comics. So between that and the British invasion, but for me, it was really things like Daredevil, Batman, some weird stuff. I know he's a European artist, but Gru by Sergio.
Oh,
Aragon.
I love Gru. I used to collect that. Oh yeah.
And then sort of jumping off that, because it was syndicated, Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes. And then you start to explore the greats, you know, that your Kirby's, your Ditkos, and then a lot of my influences cited Kirby and Ditko. So you go back to that classic stuff. Anything by Chris Claremont, Alan Davis. I know Alan Davis is one of our own, but Chris Claremont and Alan Davis together are just indefeatable. Barry Windsor Smith, anything like that. And I'll sort of pretty much read anything. If it's well written and well drawn, I'm there. I tell you, I've got to say this though, and this was precipitated my departure from art and comics. That whole the early Image Wizard stuff, it killed it for me, and I took a real big step back from comics.
Right.
Yeah.
Vicky?
Well, you already brought up Calvin and Hobbes, and as someone who also really enjoyed that, being a former bad child myself, I kind of feel that we have a few similar influences as a retired headbanger and punker myself. I know it's hard to believe that now that I'm old. But you know, what was it that something, I mean, I understand it, but why would something like, you know, from The Killing Joke to Calvin and Hobbes, how does that connection get met? What was it that really kind of spoke to you?
So my initial introduction to things like Calvin and Hobbes was, whilst I was probably not as much of a religious reader as a lot of my contemporaries and people I work with. In the UK, we had things like Dandy, the Beano, Whizzer and Chips, and stuff like that. So I got cartooning, and cartooning is massively part of British culture. Newspapers, it's been heavily used in advertising, and I think my immediate connection to Calvin and Hobbes was this was cartooning at its absolute pinnacle. Whilst they were drawing in a cartoon style, much like Alan Davis, if you ask Bill Watterson to draw something, he can draw a car, and you just instantly go, that's the best car. If he draws a dinosaur, it's the best dinosaur. And there was things like F-14 Tomcats in it. So whilst Calvin as a character is actually quite adult, you know, some of the things he said are quite profound. there was lots to sort of draw in a young mind. You know, I mean, there was the whole thing when they used to do stories where he was a detective, but it turned out he hadn't done his homework and he'd been put in detention or something. It just appealed to my sense of humour.
Andy, can I ask you, mate, where did you find Calvin and Hobbes? Because I got to be honest with you, that passed me by completely. Was it a newspaper you were reading, or your parents were reading, or something?
And I'm not embarrassed to say, but like a lot of grandparents, they were quite middle class, and it was syndicated in the Daily Express. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
But I didn't. Yeah, it was probably the crowning glory of the only good thing the Daily Express sort of did.
Andy, no, you're hitting the nail on the head there. Not about the politics of a newspaper, but the purpose and function that the funnies have, and have always had. So Peanuts, you know, Charlie Brown, Trudeau, you know, Doonesbury, whatever. We have Steve Bell's If in this country, and it's biting satire. But as a kid, I remember coming across those when I was 10, 11 years old, not understanding necessarily all the politics, but really liking the drawings and the caricatures, you know. So
I'm glad you mentioned Steve Bell's If is absolutely magical. And I was very lucky. My history teacher and my geography teacher were very young teachers, and I think they saw the drawings. I used to hand in essays, and they would have almost, I'd not seen Steve Bell, but I used to do almost little political characters. I remember doing an essay on the Gaza Strip and all the stuff in the 50s, and I drew on the maps, there was all like American generals and probably not quite correct Saudi Arabians and things like that. And my geography and history teacher, they were blown away, because they were like, have you read The Observer, which was a very intelligent, well-written newspaper? And I said, no. And they showed me Steve Bell's stuff. I'm glad Ben mentioned that, because if you haven't checked him out, check out it's incredible stuff. And I think you can buy it collectively.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, and the referencing you get from reading those stories, it certainly gives you the names and the characters. So we'd have Caspar Weinberger. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know Caspar Weinberger, but Steve Bell clearly was understanding. He was either Secretary of State for Defense, was he? Or
I think he was Secretary. Was he Secretary of Defense?
I think so.
Oh my gosh.
Not sure.
The thing is, you know, before you start reading the front pages of the newspaper as a kid, you're trawling the back page.
Yeah,
aren't you?
definitely.
Just quickly though, going just to sort of wrap up Calvin, we were also very lucky, and this is something that was two things that were really instrumental into me getting into sort of like the bigger world of comics. Was said newspaper had a Sunday edition, and it came with a very glossy magazine with the production value I don't think would be affordable these days to give it away. And you used to get full color one sheet Calvin and Hobbes specials in the back.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it was better yet. Whoever their art editor was deserves a medal, because despite the newspaper's political viewpoint, they would run articles with people like Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. These were 16-page. The photographers went round to their studios.
Mm-hmm.
You could see them in their houses. You got to see stuff on the drawing boards. And I remember they did the same for a lot of films, and you got to see sort of like all the design work and stuff. We used to collect these as children, and I wish I still had them, because there was an entire issue dedicated to Jim Henson's Labyrinth.
Oh wow.
Dark Crystal.
Oh.
They did the Dick Tracy. It was all there, and you know, to be round your grandparents' house on a Sunday, but then to get front loaded with this stuff that there was. It's not like television where there's an afternoon special on the making of, or you can go on YouTube and see it all. These were very specific windows in time, and I'll treasure those forever.
I mean, that's right. Those opportunities you got to pore over some pictures and think, not just how is it done, you do it yourself and have a go at doing it, because it's not moving, it's not going to disappear after 5 minutes. And it kind of it impounds on me is the fact that we're in a society now where fewer and fewer newspaper or newsprint opportunities exist for this stuff to be disseminated, however it is, across any kind of, you know, type of newspaper. But we're losing all of our, I don't know about you guys in the States, but we're losing our community newspapers, you know, the local newspapers.
We are too.
Yeah.
But there we go.
There's a handful of major companies that own most of the newspapers in the United States, and I've noticed over the last 20 years, the local newspaper has gotten thinner and thinner and thinner. I don't even know if you could do a bird cage with it anymore. And but that's so true when I think about some of the things that I saw growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and the different quality of work and the different things that inspired me, that the only reason my son got exposed to that was because I gave him stuff, or I had it around the house, or it's funny. I was just thinking as you were describing it, the only thing I get that is tangible, that is that detailed or anything else. There's a quarterly magazine that comes out for the D23 Club, which is a Disney club. And it is a thick book. It is gorgeous. It is filled with pictures and drawings, and you don't see that quality anymore. So how are the next generation supposed to be inspired if it's not out there? I have been seeing my massive collection of movies, but that's one thing. And you're right, it's fleeting. You watch it, but then I like to get, we call them in the States, coffee table books.
Yeah.
And I've got books on the art of a variety of movies and shows, because it shows the concept art, like of Star Wars and Star Trek and all these things that you just don't get today. And I am not an artist. Thank God my son has talent. I have zero. And it just, I'm so thankful that I was able to expose him, because there's nothing out there. And if we didn't have things like the 77 with these, because my son's stealing my copies.
There's another whole genre that's just totally disappeared as well. The music press.
Yes.
There were 4 newspaper style periodicals in the UK: Melody Maker, Sounds, NME, and Andy, I've forgotten the fourth one, maybe you'll recall them. But these were proper newspaper size things, and they came out weekly, and they would all have strips in, and obviously artists doing feature work on it. I mean, Andy does album art and stuff, but people have to start somewhere, don't they? I mean, Alan Moore started off in Sounds, I think, with the name of, I can't remember the name of the cat, the little cat, cartoon cat, Maxwell the cat, I believe it was.
Right. Sound was very generous and kind to the comic community. In fact, it was funny where comics in the UK would turn up. Ben might know this. I remember arguing with my dad, going, please go to the newspaper shop on a Sunday. And he goes, oh, I'm not getting that newspaper. But it had Glenn Fabry, both were written by Pat Mills, I believe, or one was written by Pat Mills, but Scarther and the Brendan McCarthy. I think Pete Milligan wrote the other one, Ben. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But Sounds used to do a lot for comics, particularly if it was relevant or pertinent to sort of music fans, not just because the comics were a really big thing in the UK during the 1980s. They were just, you couldn't, you were tripping over the damn things. It was literally, they were part of comics.
And then that kind of branch out, didn't we? Or blended hybrid of, for example, music with comic, which was Deadline. Which was pretty much moving that thing on. It featured bands, it featured pretty cool kind of, fashion items as well, but had a backbone of art by the names that Andy's just mentioned.
But you see, that just fits in with what I grew up with. In the 80s, I was living in Hawaii, and our favorite comic book shop was called Jellies. And it had everything. It had LPs, it had comic books, it had strange films. I got my first copy of Rocky Horror Picture Show in Korean from there. It was kind of like we were all like-minded people. And even if we didn't all like the exact same genre, we kind of had kindred spirits, and it just made it so, it made sense it was all together, because I'm a huge lover of music and movies and comic books and books. And to me, it all fits. I don't see that crossover as often anymore. And I feel like I was amazed to see, Andy, your LP artwork, because I feel like that is a lost art.
Well, right. So there's everything you've said. The story behind all of those is basically encapsulated in what you've said. So the latest one, which has been plastered all over New York, and as he tours through the East Coast, I know he's done Massachusetts, and that's not quite East Coast, but I know he's Pennsylvania. But Paris Mayhew, one of the founding members of the Cro Mags, the Age of Quarrel album with the big nuclear explosion. Harley Flanagan, who was in the press recently for a very nasty fight at a New York hardcore show. But anyway, Paris was one of the founding members of the Cro Mags. And I'd come back to artwork. I don't think I'd even been in the 77. And like a lot of people on social media, instead of adding family members, I just went for all my favorite music heroes. And I quietly sat on the sidelines because Paris has got some pretty strict rules. If you mess about, you'll find out. And it turns out the whole New York hard scene were reading those very stark black and white 2000 AD strips.
Oh, wow.
And that was so that was 1982. That was roughly around the same year. I'm a lot younger than Paris, but or not much younger than him. But he was like 15 at the time, and I was like 5.
That's a distance. That's a distance.
But so whilst they're sort of developing their hardcore punk bands, you will see them in Judge Death, Nemesis t-shirts, Dread t-shirts, and his words to me was, your stuff's like that 2000 AD stuff that we used to get back in the day. I want my album artwork to have that vibe.
Oh.
Yeah, so I've got to give Paris props because he's just finished directing the City of the Dead with Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Okay.
And it just goes to show how small the world is.
Yeah.
But 20, 30 years ago, I was holding those LPs and you're just like, these guys are a million miles away. And now it shrinks right down. Yeah, it's all interlinked.
We had a previous show, Andy, with Mike Collins, and we were discussing how during COVID, the midst of all of that, we'd actually commissioned him to do how many other strips it is for the 77, and that he's forged a really good writing, a creative relationship with Michael Powell, who we would have met last week at Lawless. But, probably even 10, 15 years ago, that might not have happened because there just weren't those opportunities. You had to be introduced. It was all that kind of thing. And nowadays you get to experience people's work much, not easily, but it's just, you can contact them and there's a kind of all the avenues are open. So I totally agree with that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Ben, because this came up on the This Is Haunted panel. Is the comics industry had a glass ceiling. Not my favorite phrase, but positions as writers, artists, editors. It was dead man's shoes, and it was its own insular community. Independent publishing, Kickstarters. I'm certainly not against the phrase independent comics. Although I think people sometimes draw an inference that it's a lesser entity. But the hard work that Ben's put in with his editorial team and the groundwork laid by other independent publishers has completely broken the mold. And the underground is now becoming the mainstream. And like Ben said, some of the people that I've been fortunate to be published alongside, not just in the 77, but in other publications, I think Ben's quite right. Pre-lockdown, the pre-pandemic, this wouldn't have happened. So it's an incredible privilege and an opportunity, and I think it's been capitalized on, but it's been very healthy for the comic book industry. It's bringing comic books back, and I think I'll fly the flag for the 77 here. For its price tag, that's a lot of comic book.
Yes.
Really keen on seeing happening. His comics should be cheap. They should be good quality, but I would like to see the cover price getting cheaper, or as close to the bone you can take it. So people, when they walk past it, they're like, $2.99. That thing's a Bible. I'm going to buy it anyway. sort of bring that kind of mentality back.
Well, we'll have more of this interview with Andr Sawyers here on MarkWHO77's Universe right after these messages.
Don't go away. Don't go away. We'll be back with more MarkWHO77 after this.
Hello, geeks and geekettes. I'm Steve Megatron, and if you're looking for a podcast that covers a vast array of geeky topics, then check out Altered Geek. Altered Geek covers superheroes, Star Trek, pop culture, comics, film, television, animation, gaming, tech, and more. So check out Altered Geek and get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks every Friday on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, Blog Talk Radio, and the Geekcast Radio Network.
You are listening to MarkWHO77's Universe.
We are now going to continue the MarkWHO77, which is an interview with MarkWHO77 is a joint production of the 77 Publications and MarkWHO77's Universe. We've got continuing our interview with Andr Sawyers.
Now, I have to agree with that, because I think about even when I was a kid, comic books at your corner store, I would buy them on military bases. I grew up military, and you know, they were not quite pennies, but they were cheap.
Mhm.
And it was a great, easy way to get entertainment for very little money. It was open to everybody. I think that's one of the things that's nice about comic books in general, is that they're kind of there for everybody, and there's something there for everybody. And, you know, my older brother and I, my younger siblings, not so much, but my older brother and I just were really into, oh, this looks interesting, and moving around a lot and being all over the country, getting access to comic books that we might not have gotten, because this is, of course, before things were global. But I think it would be so nice for some kid to walk by a newsstand, or whatever the heck we call them these days, and and go, ooh, I can afford that. I've got my allowance in my pocket. Let me go and try something new. And yeah. I wish that I hope that this resurgence we're having in comic books and in so many other things, for as bad as the pandemic was, there is a silver lining to all this. I noticed it in my day job. I've noticed in some of my side projects that there's this like whole new way of doing things. This whole new, oh, we can do this now, or we can try this now. People suddenly became open to trying new things. So I'm just excited, because I'm hoping that 2023, which I know we're halfway through, but if it continues the way it is, I see so many good things happening over the horizon.
What we're able to afford to do, because we have really good people who back our creators, get the comic off the ground. When we go and we do in-person shows, I did a charity show at a fundraiser a few weeks ago, and when we do the shows anyway, basically you're seeing the people coming by, you're chatting to them about what they like, and we can almost match them now for various titles. We've got a new one that we're just working on at the moment anyway. For younger readers is something I'm planning as well. But I think when you're in person, you can have that discussion. We discount our books at that point. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily discount them at the Kickstarter end. It's almost like paying forward. We've got a whole bunch of people who kind of pay forward for a whole bunch of other people to come along, because, you know, it's unfortunate, but production costs are only going one way. And I wish that we could produce comics for pennies. I really do. But, you know, the fact is that we have a sensibility about us, which means we want to share things. So we're always doing on our pages and our social media opportunities that people can get, you know, half price comics. They can get free digital downloads, you know, for sure. That's
phenomenal. You know, if we need more companies to have the sensibility that you do. I mean, not only do you do this amazing product, but then you know, you do your best, you do the Kickstarters, you get as much money as you can, and then you try to work. I'm on the local ballet board here in Reno, and we do that where we give to the Boys and Girls Club and Big Brothers Big Sisters, which are two huge American charities. We give free tickets to expose kids to the arts that might not otherwise get an opportunity So it just, I love hearing stories like that, because now, of course, you already know how much I love the 77 publications. I have a few of them. I may have all of them now.
I've got them all. Woo!
But it just, I think more people need to be exposed to it. Not only the superior product that you guys do, but just the artistic side of it, the stories, the prospects, I want to inspire the next generation into going that, when you and I are long gone, someone else will be taking up the mantle of the 77 publications and continuing this dream. That would be just heavenly.
I mean, from my point of view, and this isn't my show, I get Andy's our guest. So, I kind of feel as a commissioning editor, and obviously, meeting new creators and stuff, it's where we've gone and what we've got in the time that we've got, I think really means good things will happen, in the same time that we've just been scrabbling around. Now we're kind of, I mean, Andy will tell you that the show he went to, he knows that the company sponsored it. He was on a panel, he gets invited to shows, opportunities are there for all the guys if they want to be able to kind of maximize on that. We've got other people who were just like, in for it, doing a bit of a quiet life, like doing some writing, like doing some drawing. But if you're wholehearted about it, and I very much like people like that, we're all steering together to try and kind of, just get out there as much as we can, as much as we can sustain as well. So, I mean, Andy would say as well, I don't know, how many other titles are you working on at the moment, mate? You've got several other projects on at the go.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the thing is there's a twofold parts of this question. So Ben, I've got to pay Ben a compliment. We don't butt heads, but I've got to pay massive respect to Ben. He's got a vision, and whilst that perhaps doesn't always align with my vision, and I'm a big mouth, but you need a strong captain, and I think Ben has built a house that's just going to grow. And I think probably the one thing, if I ever walked away from comics, would be that I genuinely do believe Ben and the team that involved with him have created something that has an enduring legacy. And I think it'll be funny. We will look back and go, "Oh, do you remember when this used to be a kick?" It was done in people's bedrooms, and I used to draw on backs of cardboard, and and the thing is, I think we get frustrated and we get impatient because you want everything to happen now.
Right.
But when you look at it in I don't think we're even 3 years yet. The things that have been achieved, the sheer volume of work is incredible. And it's given people that were perhaps considering walking away from comics a new lease of life, or they were in the twilight part of their careers, and then they've suddenly sort of just gone, well, these crazy kids, to hell with it. Let's jump in and get involved in the party. It's reignited their passion for it. Ben just doesn't stop. Neither does Steve and Joe and Dave and other people that have been involved.
Or you don't stop.
we can tell that you're drawing this entire.
How many live sessions do you do, mate? You can be there night or day. I love it.
Yeah, basically,
I get everything on my messenger. Sawyers is live. It's brilliant.
At least once a day. I think that's the good thing about technology, and I've seen a lot of contemporaries and people I really admire. They put the time in with the readers or the people that support them, and I think you just feel duty bound to just give everything back to them. And if that inspires them to start doing it, and if they, it's good. But in answer to your other question, I think you're just going to see this it all comes back to Lawless. It is completely reignited. I think there's a groundswell for all of this coming back, and I think it will eventually go beyond past us. It will just become its own thing again. I think we're going to see a real return it will be new and exciting, but like you said, passing on that legacy to the younger generation, it will inspire them to take up the mantle. And I think that's what's vital about what we're doing now, particularly with the 77. Yeah, it's exciting times.
Question: how did you two meet, and you end up drawing for the 77?
Got to pay the compliment to Ben. He'd seen my stuff online off the back of a competition to do with another podcast, and in true Ben fashion, if he sees something and he wants it, he'll go and ask. And he literally
Tell him
approached
what
me.
it was. It's is it Drokktober you were doing?
That's right. And you just said, do you want to work with Bambos? And we've got a strip lined up for issue 2. In fact, you originally approached me. I was meant to do the Tingling Triangles with McMahon, and I just couldn't get it done in time. And you went, don't panic, I've got something else for you. And me and Bambos went onto the Cell. So, you know, Ben just was literally, I'm going to put this guy in print. Ben made it happen.
Bambos is a legend, isn't he? He's got a 40-year career behind him. He's done all sorts of horror work. He's done all sorts of different top drawer strips and stories. Yeah, no, he's just an absolute sweetheart. He's a lovely guy. So, but yeah, no, so it's all down to Ben. But that was the other thing you asked me. What else am I working on? I've got stuff coming up for Unit 666. I've got some more music stuff coming up. Ravenous for This Is Haunted, systemation of the 77. That's basically. Yeah. What about for Corkwood books? Is it?
Yeah, I've got another cover coming out from them, but I don't know what else is in the pipelines with those guys.
No, you also about to say you did do a great job on what's our lupine friend, the Hare, hardcore.
Yes, there's more El Benito. There's quite a lot of Calvin and Hobbes in that because it's quite cartoony. But yeah, the rabbits from outer space that everyone thinks are rabbits, but they're not. They're like a dictatorship from outer space, but their plan to conquer the Earth has been brought to a halt.
We'll definitely put up some illustrations there. What we'll do, Andrew, at both points, we're going to put some illustrations up, and I want to.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if these guys have seen the gun-toting, cigar-chewing El Benito. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. Benito, absolutely fantastic. And that's a creation of the character design is sort of you and obviously Joe Healy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's weird. Me and the kids, me and my good lady, and I think we just do it as people. We talk about our pets. We talk about our love of all these weird and wonderful animals. It's like at the moment, I think the big craze is watching videos of capybaras just lounging around in hot water, surrounded by lemons and apples. I think it sort of grew out of all of that stuff. And then Joe was kind of like, so I want you to do my rabbit in like a Napoleon costume. I went, nah, what you really want is your rabbit in space armor dropping out of a drop ship.
Sounds so much better.
And she saw it and she was like, we've got to do a strip. So I was like, okay. And I put something together and she had sort of plotted it off the back of a conversation. And I was very fortunate because there's nothing wrong with being a girls' comic or a comic aimed at a female audience. I actually knew what Joe was getting at. There was just another genre of British comics. And I think perhaps in no pun intended, in lieu of Lou Stringer doing something for Pandora, it added a bit of brevity to what was quite a heavy emotional comic, proper grown up, mature stuff in there. And it sort of took the edge off towards the end, but that it was great. That's a special book, and to be a part of that was wonderful. But yeah, the space rabbits will be back, and there'll be other creatures which you'll recognise, but they're also aliens. And they will
Yeah,
be
you've certainly done a wide range of different styles, if not styles of strips as well, haven't you? You're given quite a few different genres to work on.
Yeah, I think so. My original plan was to go into like advertising, and of course, everyone wants to draw, say, Batman. But if you, most failed comic book artists end up in advertising. So I was just like, well, I'll just go straight to advertising. So when I was studying, you try and embrace a variety of styles, whether it's or disciplines, whether it's painting or pencils or whatever, to meet the demands of advertising or illustration. Because if you're working for a newspaper, for example, we need a watercolor of something like a landscape, so that's what you go and do that day. So I think there's always been that mentality that you need to be very flexible and open to change your style to fit the brief.
I have to say that in some of the variety I've seen of your artwork, there is one thing that seems to underline all of it. You have a very kinetic feel. There's your images have a lot of motion to them, or have a lot of, sometimes things can feel very flat and 2D. Yours feels like there is a motion to it.
I think that's that's the 2000 AD in me. The other part actually comes down to my art teacher at senior school. I don't want to see these little brush strokes. I don't want to see every line. Get that brush, and if you're painting the hair, you can always cut it back afterwards, right across the page. And I think more so than ever, I was always aware of it, but since returning to art, you can really be literally carving away at the page, and then you just keep working on top of it until you get it roughly to where you want to. I think half the time the energy comes from the fact that I haven't actually finished it. I get bored. And then going back to the music thing as well, it's the punk rock in me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't be note perfect. It's more about the performance, the energy. I don't think people are standing there checking to see if Vinny Stigma's playing in the right key or hitting the right note. They want to see him doing all, like, so whilst the rest of the band are taking it seriously, you've got Vinny in the background messing around, and he's always having fun. So yeah, it's that hardcore punk attitude. Just it's about the show, just put that energy. Yeah.
You're a big Suicidal Tendencies fan, aren't you, mate? Like,
yeah. So I don't know what it is. I think I wish I could. If I could get into a time machine right now, I would grab Ben and go, "You need to come with me back to 1987." Funnily enough, it comes back to art. I was at senior school drawing, and I certainly wasn't an introvert because I had my friends, but I wasn't particularly interested in getting more friends. And this kid kept bugging me about my artwork, and he said, "Look," and I said, "In the end, I'll just give you all this original artwork." And he gave me a load of tapes, and I said, "I don't listen to music. My parents have music on. I've got no interest in it, no need for it." And he's like, "You've got to listen to these guys." And I looked at him and I'm like, "Oh, they wear regular clothes aside from the bandana." And they weren't singing about Dungeons and Dragons. It was all about skateboarding, which is something me and Ben connect on, and just growing up. And Venice Beach.
Been there a few times.
Yeah. Well, I've been once. I loved it, but South London wasn't a million miles away from kind of like the same problems of urban life. Is a unique thing, and it comes with its own social injustices, and Suicidal Tendencies sang about righting those injustices. And I think they were, educationally for me, it was about being truthful and you know, being good to people, taking care of family, and I dug them a lot, and and they also I love the bandanas. I'm a big Suicidal fan. So.
But I think that goes with a lot of the same culture things that we like, be it art, comics, books, films. I'm not saying it's about putting them right, the social injustices. At least, first of all, recognizing they exist.
Yes.
And it is a thing. It's a thing for people. Just because you may not have it in your life doesn't mean it's not a thing for other people. You know, I think that opens your mind, and then you go, okay, maybe I do need to consider that other people have different experiences rather than just having this whole single eye direction. You know, there's this big myth, by the way, guys, I'm not here to put anyone down, but there's this big myth that Americans don't hold passports and don't travel. Well, they don't necessarily need to. They don't need to, because they can travel across the country and they're going to see a lot of different in their country, right? You know, you only have to go in some states, one side of the state to the other, and it's a completely different world. And
Texas takes 2 days to get through. I've driven it. Yeah.
I mean, we're very lucky. You know, our land mass is quite small. We can go to different countries within a few hundred miles. You know, we're quite fortunate for that. You can get on a bus. You can drive around Europe for, you know, a few pounds. You know, it's not expensive at all. But I'm not for one going, oh, you know, people who live in a huge country and only travel around there aren't as you know, educated. I don't think that's right at all. But I think the thing is, that's probably because I've listened to that type of music for 40 years, which tells me that, you know,
having lived on one side of the country to the other and been to three other countries other than the US, I can say that, you know, it very much helped shape, you know, having lived in what we call the original 13 colonies and then moving across the country, moving to the last state. I lived in Hawaii for several years. And coming back to the mainland and going all over, you get interesting perspectives that staying at home never gets you. And I think it's kind of why I have some of the same sensibilities, because I live in the smallest town I've ever lived in before. The place I live now only has 500,000 people. It's the smallest place I've ever lived. And it took me many years to get used to. But it just... you know, getting out there and seeing everything and being exposed to everything probably explains a lot about me and some of my interesting tastes. And they call me eclectic, but I think that I may make other eclectic people feel weird. So,
and that's a good thing. That is being suicidal. Yeah.
Well, I knew I was in trouble when my son's first grade teacher asked me why his favorite band was the Ramones. So
why not? What kind of question is that?
You know, it's like I raised my son with very interesting, strange, you know, it's like my perfect example. My father loved Elvis. My mother listened to Motown. My parents are from Detroit. My mother's older sister got me into Shakespeare. That's why that was my first degree. And you know, and I got exposed to classical music, and I grew up Catholic, so I got exposed to all that. And then, of course, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. So, you know, I have this weird, strange, eclectical mix of music and movies. And I just thought everyone did that.
Yeah. I mean, I had a magical moment. My youngest she's only 8. But over breakfast, she told me that at school they're studying A Midsummer's Night's Dream. And she's telling me all about the characters. And I'm just sitting there absolutely marveling, going, you create this little bean, and that little bean's now telling me about Shakespeare. And I just thought, isn't it a marvellous place? Isn't the world a marvellous place?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's funny. I've had to Google this, Andy. So I was trying to do this whole quote about, you know, a reader will live 1,000 lives, where somebody doesn't read but only live one. And I'm thinking, was it Primo Levi? Was it Saul Bellow? No. It's George R.R. Martin. Yeah. But that whole notion that by reading, by engrossing yourselves in other things, you see the world in different ways, don't you? Even as even with a guy with a donkey face, you know, as in Midsummer Night's Dream, you know. So,
that is right. You got it. You got punk.
You got it. You got punked. Yeah.
I think Shakespeare was the original punk.
I think he
Yes,
was
he
a punk
was.
too. Got it, mate. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you realize how many of our turns or phrases go back to that. And I named my son after Shakespeare. He tells everyone I named him after William Shatner. He's like his father. He's into tech and everything. He's not into Shakespeare. He could care less. But it just, there's so many things. And I did several productions when I was younger and still on the stage. And I mean, there were just so many things in it. The intrigue, there's so many movies and stories that we can trace back to his stories. And there's some really awful things that happen. We were talking about the Little Mermaid and Denmark, and I referred back to Hamlet. Everyone dies. Must be, you're Danish. Everyone dies. And so it just, you could never get away with a movie today where everyone dies. Nobody likes that. Someone has to live at the end.
Yeah, that's something I'm really worried about. There's a lot of stuff coming out that adheres to a very safe, formulaic process that the hero. I'm not saying like let's make everything dark and
no, but a little more reality.
Yeah, it's very easy to guess plot lines, particularly in films. But I'm very excited because there's a lot of new films coming out. I hope it's good, but there's a film coming out called The Creator, and I can't believe a film with that budget and that level of effects, really good effects, like you can't tell they're not effects other than we haven't made robots that big, blah, blah, blah. But you're sitting there going, if that was on the news, I'd be terrified. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because everything comes from a property or it's a reboot. But I think we're on the cusp of seeing in cinema a new generation of complete the ground up original. Because like when we were growing up, we had like Labyrinth, The Dark Crystal. Yes, Indiana Jones was based on the old 1950s style serials and things like that. But it
still was very fresh at the time.
But even when what was also good about those films, yes, the hero won, but it came at a cost. It wasn't this sort of they walk away completely scratch free. He'd maybe lost someone or there was really been taken to the edge. There's a lot of safe stuff out there at the moment, but we'll see. I think these exciting times. So yeah.
Oh no, we have to take another break. Oh, and guys, this next part that's coming after the commercial break is for our podcast listeners only. Please stay tuned for more of MarkWHO42 and the 77 Publications own MarkWHO77's interview with Andrew Sawyers.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more MarkWHO42 after this.
Because the world needs another movie podcast.
The Geekcast Radio Network presents for your listening pleasure The Cinema Geek.
Hosted by Amanda, Kevin, Matt, and Dan.
Each week we dive headfirst in the landscape of movies as we discuss movie news, play movie games,
go in-depth on reviews,
and even have a top 10 countdown or two.
Also, don't miss our director retrospective series, where we review noted directors' movies film by film. Bottom line is, if you love movies and love podcasts, you need to experience The Cinema Geeks.
You can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, or geekcastradio.com.
Let's get right back into MarkWHO77's interview with Andrew Sawyers.
I don't like it if I'm watching a movie and I know in 10 minutes how it's going to end.
Yeah.
I want to be surprised. And maybe because I grew up military or, I've now been around a while. I've seen a little bit of death and destruction in life. So it's okay for reality. It's okay when, Alfred Hitchcock would kill important actors off in the first 5 minutes of a movie. I want to see that again. I want to be surprised. I want to see a little bit of reality. Yes, movies are an escapism. Comic books are an escapism, but I want some of that grittiness. It can't always be flowers and unicorns.
I think we had some of that with Game of Thrones. I think that was, you know, he surprised us, didn't he? The writer, he kind of every now and again something would happen, and we go, oh, that person that's it, they're gone. But Andy, your work appears quite regularly in our titles, back and front end, because of course we had an animated sequence done of some of the early work from the comic, and I think your work really lends itself to that. I don't know if you've ever considered the sort of notion of maybe trying to work on a sequential, I mean, you know, four-dimensional terms. I don't know if that's anything you've ever thought about doing animated work.
I think so. I feel really bad because I know, for example, you're far more tech savvy than I am. I think that's I think that's where we're really lucky. All of the 77 sort of staff and editorial, there's a lot of stuff that gets done behind the scenes that puts us.
We know people, mate, don't we? We've got friends. I have to admit, though, I'm really behind the times with a lot of technology and IT, and I think at some point I'm going to have to invest. I think the other thing is there's a fear of I end up discovering another medium, and it takes me away from the actual drafting of just getting your hands dirty with ink. But I think it may have to come because the world is changing, and I think the demands for a slightly more polished product are more evident today than they've ever been. I can tell you, mate, when I interviewed your AI avatar, they're up for it, mate. They're going to do this. You know? Yeah. Exactly. The AI version of Andy Sawyers, yeah, he'll be much better. I just don't. Yeah, what do you think about that, mate? What's your opinions? It's you know, we weren't going to ask this as a question, but what do you think about AI? What's your take on it?
Thing is, it's going to happen. It's already happened.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I feel lucky that it's gone this way. People are divided in two camps, and I've seen some AI. I'm sitting on these somewhere on my phone. I've got 4 lovely, really dark, rich coloured Aztec paintings. And as soon as I saw them, I'm like, these are amazing. I sent it to my friend, and he goes, "Yeah, they're nice, but you know that's AI." Because he's already seen the article. Okay. Well, I still like them. I don't like this war of attrition between those that have learned to draw or can draw, and then people that are using AI to create these wonderful images going, oh, I don't know why. I'm like, we should all be. There was probably similar arguments between guitar players who have spent months and months, if not years, learning how to play a guitar, and then some guy rocks up with a keyboard and with a press of 2 buttons has just done his whole. I think this is a time immemorial question, and it'll develop into something else further down the line. I just think, going back to what we was all talking about earlier on, the whole world is a special place. Humans are special. We should cherish our ability to actually create ourselves, rather than just pushing everything else off onto a machine. You're killing the human experience. That's my only concern. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Yeah, but I think we'll be all right. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, so I know that some of your work has been published in America. What do you think the difference is between the US and the British comic industry?
I think I would actually put comics in America as one of the jewels in America's crown. And I think even today, with changes in attitudes and what's fashionable, America still has a great love affair with comic books. Sadly, in the UK, it's almost been boiled down to the diehards. There are still lots of new people coming into the industry, lots of new people still reading comics, but it's not the powerhouse it used to be. It used to be, maybe the empire has fallen, and we've had our time in the sun. But there was a time, particularly during the 80s, if we put out a comic, we could do no wrong. It was just absolute pound for pound, sheer heavyweight stuff. I don't think it's a simple case of money or finances, but American comic books still have a huge draw. I think one of the things, probably not the most well-known comic, although every comic book fan knows it, Love and Rockets, 40 years on, still going strong, and it's just as good as it was when it started. I think that's the big difference, is America never fell out of love with comics. Besides, you got Big Old Blue. Superman will carry comics a long time.
Yeah, you're exactly. We've got the Ravens in the Tower of London. You've got Superman.
Yeah, if Superman
when the Ravens leave the tower, that's the end of us.
Oh, that's it. That's the end of everything.
When Soups leaves, exactly, it's the same, isn't it?
No, well said.
I can't believe, exactly. I mean, it's strange to think, isn't it? But I mean, the guy's been flying around for what?
1938.
Yeah.
1938. There was a time before Superman. Can you imagine?
There was? Are you sure?
I didn't know that. Thank you for informing me. I really appreciate you letting me know this.
I think, do you know what? I could do it. I'm not the biggest Superman in the world, but I do love him. But there's something
you can judge an artist against their Superman. Come on, Frank Quitely's, yeah? Another Frank, big Frank. I love his work. Miller. But all the names, all the big names, if you want to know what they're like, you just ask them. You don't ask them to do. You see their Superman, don't you? And you go, "Yep, that's a new twist on it. That's a new way of doing it."
Yeah.
I didn't grow up reading Superman. I've got to admit. In fact, some of the earliest Superman I would have read was the stuff that I bought, which was Dark Knight, really. And I was already, by that time, I was 20.
See, I grew up on George Reeves, the TV show.
Yeah.
And my mother was a huge George Reeves fan. And so I used to watch that in syndication form. And just, it became a thing. And then Christopher Reeves came out. And of course, my mother took me immediately to go see that.
We weren't lucky enough to have that syndicated TV show.
Yeah.
Right.
Superman. They said Superman. You'll believe Superman can fly when Christopher Reeves flew, and I went to the cinema as a young kid, and it was everything that was great and slightly more uplifting than some of the other sort of sci-fi at the time, wasn't it? So definitely.
There was something about that.
I read Superman. Well, I'd seen the TV show, I'd seen the movie serials, and of course the Christopher Reeve movie. But in 1986, I got into Superman full time with the John Byrne revamp. Yeah. And then it continued into Ordway and Roger Stern, and I loved Superman. I had every issue of any Superman comic, any Superman appearance from 1986 to like 2003.
Yeah.
And then I sold it and got barely any money for it. So I lost a big ton of money, but I love the character.
I love the John. So what John Byrne did for Superman, I think was great. I just don't think he went far enough. A lot of what he did was just cleaning up continuity.
Yeah.
Very soft reset without treading on people's toes. But it was around that time John Byrne became as good as a writer as he was an artist. Yeah. And I was hoping he would take the character further, not change him, but he would be far braver with his writing strokes. And I was surprised how safe he kept it with a lot of that stuff. But it was good. It was good. But I think probably the most Superman thing I've ever seen was so Zack Snyder brought back Superman, the Man of Steel.
Oh.
But hang on. Most Superman thing about that was there was a beautiful shot of Martha Kent hanging up the washing.
Right.
And you could barely see it because the sunset was so strong. And you don't see his head, but you see a very young Clark Kent standing in the foreground, and he's got a red kitchen towel around his shoulders. And they used ever so slight, what's the word, an interpolation of the original theme song.
Right.
And I think it's little things like that that truly encapsulate Superman. The rest of the film, average.
Oh, I hate to say, well, I don't hate to say it. And people are going to hate me for this. I did not like the Superman that they did. I did not like the Batman Justice League. I kind of got into it, but I'm not sure what the big deal about, and I'm going to get killed here, Zack Snyder is. I don't actually know, because he made everything so dark. I mean, Superman is fighting Zod in Metropolis and knocking down all these buildings that probably have people in them. And there's like, Superman doesn't seem to make any big deal about it. He's just gung-ho on fighting Zod. I mean, it's so dark.
Yeah.
There are bits and pieces I like about those films, and I'm not the biggest Zach fan. I dislike him for a couple of different reasons. And it just, I get trying to push the envelope, trying to do something new. But it's just like, if you ever do a character that has been done a million times before, whether it's, Tennessee Williams or Shakespeare, you can take it to certain areas, but you can't leave the character behind. And as much as we'd like to see Superman do different things, there are certain things at the core of Superman that have been there since the beginning. And it makes it really hard that he can never be the Dark Knight. You could take Batman to the Dark Knight, but you can't take Superman quite there, because there is a feeling about Superman. I mean, he's as American as apple pie, and there's this
and I think I'm glad you said that, because let's say an apple pie was sentient. They really would. They really would be happy and all about bringing people happiness and making sure everyone's okay. So ergo, I think Superman really is like apple pie. And I think kind of Zach, I'm not defending Zach, because I think that there's a lot of those movies, but I think he kind of tried to address that when Batman tried to take Clark to task. It's like, so you come down here and you're getting upset because I've broken a few arms and knocked a few teeth out, and there's a few people that have been maimed and scarred as cause and consequence of my actions. Well, listen here, kid, this is the reality of what we do. I'm not happy about it, but what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
You're moaning at me because I'm a vigilante and I've broken a few arms. You killed tens of thousands of people in a battle with another agent. As far as I'm concerned, you brought war to our planet. And I think the rot sort of sat in with the Superman character. I think if I was to do a character like that, maybe you would have this almost little angel on Superman's shoulder, where it's not the ghost of his dad, but his conscience saying to him, Clark, you can't run around doing this. If you was to flick someone in the head, you'll snap their neck. You're going to have to.
Isn't that why, Andy, when we grew up reading Dredd, we liked Dredd, not liked him, but we liked the strip, because he always had to come back to the law.
Yeah.
To quote Step Brothers, Ben, did we just become best friends? Because funny enough.
Those aren't cushions.
Yeah, exactly why I love Judge Dredd. He's not evil, but even when he does bad things or makes the wrong decision, it was always written into the strip. Even if it wasn't Dredd understanding the consequences of it, there was always that perspective. There are ramifications and consequences for action. It was very real world. If you do this, this happens. It was all caused respect. And I think that was the big allure with Dredd is he can't have his cake and eat it. Do you know what? I think it's possibly if we was to look at the character from a writer's point of view, probably the only reason he's psychologically still standing is he's bereft a lot of human traits and emotions. He's starting to get it as he gets older and softer, and but I think most normal people, your mind would melt with some of the things he's had to do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Judge Dredd is supposed to be dark. Superman's supposed to be light. It's not supposed to be dark. Not light, but definitely not, killing everybody.
I think Superman can go to the edge of the envelope. He just can't
but he can't pass it.
envelope.
And it just seemed like in that
And
fight
there's plenty
sequence,
of
he
other
passed it.
characters that can give us that. And I think that's, again,
Exactly.
one of the reasons that I've enjoyed so many different characters and so many different comic books is because, sometimes I need that rule breaker. Sometimes I need that straight and narrow.
Mhm.
Sometimes I need that emotional tug. Sometimes, I just want to see something blow up, That's my catharsis today. I must watch something explode. And you almost need that pantheon of characters so that you can enjoy the different aspects, because we're not one-dimensional. We're most humans have a variety of emotions and need different things at different times. I'm a very different person now than I was in the 70s or even the 80s. And, although I still enjoy some of the same things, I'm a little more complex than I was when I was younger. And now I need something a little more complex. Well, if I want that, there's a variety of options I have to read or watch. And I probably would always have a problem with Superman getting too dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd Mark, I think that's a beautiful assessment. I don't think I would want to see Superman become dark.
No. I mean,
But
he's come dark in the comic a few times, but there's always been a reason behind it.
Right.
And
yeah, but like Calvin, and Superman's not as I know we're talking about.
yeah,
that's okay. I love Calvin.
I'll take that comparison. Throw in a couple of no.
There's as a reader, you sit there knowing at some point he's going to have to go down the Christopher Robin route and accept there is a bigger adult world out there. But no, I wouldn't like him to become sort of like a darker edged anti-hero.
Right.
But it's funny, even some of the greatest minds of our planets who are good people and had humanity's best interests at heart have had to make some sort of nasty decisions. And I think that must be tough for someone or a character like Superman. He's a legend. He's fantastic. And it's great to see him endure to this day.
Okay, how do your kids feel about your art? You got a couple of kids. What do they think about what Daddy does?
My eldest likes it. There's a couple of things that have come out. Funnily enough, the comic book for the box set for the death metal band, she doesn't listen to that music. She listens to nice music. But I think
that might be nice music some days.
Yeah.
But she was just genuinely blown away that something had come out that had such a profile that really ended up all over the internet. My youngest is very creative, so I think she looks at it from the point of view of, so how did you do that, and how did you get that effect, and sort of what materials. We just dug out today. I found an old folder of some really old artwork, and the reason I dug it out was I knew it had sheets and sheets of Letraset, the letters that people used to use it to make flyers and stuff. That's what I used it for. I used to make flyers for bands back in the mid-90s. And you'd use Letraset to get it all looking slick and professional. And then you could use whiteout to do an outline where it crossed over the black artwork and stuff. And so she's been playing with that today. Yeah, they like it, but they're not. This came up in conversation earlier on. I was talking to a guy earlier on, and it's funny. People they're just absolutely indifferent to it. They're not that fussed. It's very bizarre.
Well, I think we're running down on time. I'm going to final questions, and Vicky always has to think about it. So Ben.
It's not a question, it's an observation. Andrew, you haven't been sketching while you've been on the show, have
He
you?
totally has. He's been sketching the entire
See his
time.
hand.
Because
Let's see
on
it. Let's see it.
Facebook there is a live. Exactly. There we go.
Whoa.
Keep it up there for just a second more. Put it back
Oh
up.
yeah, put it back up. Put it back up.
Put it back up.
Wow.
Wow. That is
I'm
really
in awe.
nice.
I'm in awe.
He's been two-timing us. He's also been doing a live drawing thing as well. I told you.
But yeah,
you can't stop the man from doing it. To be honest with you. I told you everything about him. He's dynamic. He's hardworking. He's doing it all the time. It's brilliant. That's why I love him. That's why I love him. He does it heart and soul.
I think that sums up the 77. We're lucky to have such an incredible team.
Yeah, it is team, isn't it, mate? We really do. And we don't just emphasize it. We know it. We met up at the weekend and it was just like, we got a team photo and it is just total team, isn't it? Me, you, Richmond, Stopford, Joe, Dave, Steve, and anyone else who finds us. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, it was. And it was great to meet Aid Hughes as well. What a lovely man.
Of course.
Yeah. No, it's that whole weekend, not long enough. I know some people.
It was great. Well, we'll do it all again at London Film and Comic Con, won't we, mate, in a few weeks?
Yeah, that'll be. It's funny actually. There's lots of people asking me about that. I think that'll be a big success for us.
Nice one, mate.
Yeah.
Vicky.
Well, how would you feel if, in 10 years' time, some new comic book artist comes up and tells you how much you influenced them? Could you imagine that?
I can't imagine it. There have been already some people that have been inspired to reignite their passion for art, having seen me do it. It's something I try and get into every conversation. Is you can all do this. This is not exclusive to a particular set of individuals. But no, I think if someone ever said, so I do comics because of your stuff, I think then all of the pain, sweat, tears, blood would be worth it. And it would be an honor. But then I've caught myself saying that I've been lucky to meet, particularly in the last 3 years, a lot of my heroes. And I think my opening gambit is I'm doing what I do now because of what you guys were doing 30 years ago.
Yeah.
To say to Mike McMahon and Dave Gibbons and contemporaries like that, your work, and I know they struggled in the early days, you've put a lot of people on the path to making comics. It's incredible. I think some of those people are, whilst they have massive fan bases, are hugely underrated.
Yes.
And their contributions to popular culture is massively underestimated. I'll throw some names out there. There's a lot of good second generation 2000 AD artists that are working in the film industry, and they're massively shaping a lot of, you can see the 2000 AD influence in a lot of films. That's all come from their heroes, which are the same as mine, Mike McMahon, Cullis, all of that. Mike McMahon won't have it that he influenced the new Star Wars film. Well, I'm like, well, Jock worked on the new Star Wars film. and he's your biggest fan or one of your biggest fans. So everything comes back to 2000 AD. So
yeah, that's what they say. That's what they say. There's a whole website scene and a podcast. Everything comes back to 2000.
I wonder what show that is.
Did they dare you to say that, Andrew?
As John would say, don't you dare talk about those evil people.
No, fine. One of them may even appear on the show at some point, so it's absolutely fine.
Okay. So we've touched a little about this, but I want to ask, what are your future plans for your comic books? What do you have in your future coming up?
So more El Benito for Joe. She's slowly but surely gearing up the next Pandora. I promised her fully painted, all the bells, whistles, and trinkets of a fully painted alien rabbit comic strip. If for anyone that's interested, all of that artwork those pages will be on the Kickstarter.
Oh, excellent.
Because I really want Pandora.
Oh, I wonder what I'll be doing.
I really want Pandora to be a
refresh. She'll be going.
We'll try and time the Kickstarter so Robert Cox is at work, and that'll give everyone else a chance. So
yes.
He's a good friend of mine. But Ravenous with Dave Healy. Just to sort of quickly touch back on that. It's basically John Wick meets Near Dark. So that's very much a going concern. I think we're wrapping up Silver Jubilee for the 77, but I'm sure something else will come round. There's lots happening with the 77, all of it good. But at some point after Jubilee,
what are you doing in the annual? What are you doing there, mate?
Well, I think Steve's preparing his A game to sort of put the leash on me to make sure I don't go too crazy. I won't tell you the story that we're doing, but there are very strong plans that I'm supposed to be working on. I think Aid's going to work on the Cell. I don't know.
I know you two were scheming over the weekend. You would go off into a corner, little quiet chats, and then I turn up and you'd stop talking. It was like,
he just keeps coming up with these huge list of rules of don't put this in it and don't do that and don't make it too gory. Be mindful this has got to go on the shelves of some large chains. So
you also hand them out to school libraries as well, mate. So
I'm that guy that does the stuff that when you go into the school library and you find that one book that's got past the teeth. Yeah, I'm that guy. So
cool. Nice.
Yeah, but and I'm working on my own project at the moment. It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting. There were some really crappy films that I used to like as a kid. The Prophecy series with Christopher Walken. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
But I've always loved that heaven and hell kind of war on earth kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I thought, wouldn't it be funny not funny, but interesting. The twist is that the demons and the devil, Lucifer, whatever you want to call him, they're the good guys. And then like heaven, they're more like the government, like the CIA. They're just
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. But then the weird thing is, one of the angels, who's a very nasty piece of work, she has to go find out the top demon guy and say, I actually need you to help me save the planet because the big boss has gone too far this time. So, it's kind of like how Crowley in Supernatural was. He was meant to be the king of hell, but he likes Sam and Dean too much. So it's that. And I think that's about it. But lots of band stuff coming up, more stuff from Memoriam. And I think at some point they'll be looking to have a sequel to the Rise to Power comic that was in their box set. So more war stuff. That was very caveman-like. It was just tanks and helicopters and jet. I tell you, that was mostly inspired by Bill Watterson.
Okay.
I know exactly.
Everything comes back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I know exactly which ones you're talking about.
Yeah, in between looking at Cam Kennedy's stuff, the Light and Darkness War, all the other books I had on my drawing table doing that death metal comic was Bill Watterson, the Lazy Sunday book and Attack of the Snow Goons and Revenge of the Babysitter.
I actually own them all.
Yeah. In fact, I can't walk past a shop if I see one going cheap. Like you go past like a store and you see it, you've got to rescue it. So
absolutely.
Sometimes leave them on train seats if I've got like a spare copy.
Ooh.
Someone to find.
Introduce a new set.
Yeah. So no, it's good.
Cool.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's about it. Well, we're going to go, but I'm going to thank you in just a second. Ben, go through some housekeeping. What's people can find the 77, what Kickstarters are running right now.
Okay. So the Kickstarters, we've got the Lifeboat, Ian Gibson's Lifeboat. That finishes the 8th of, the 18th of June. It's doing very well. Keep an eye out for that. There's the Imagination of Ian Gibson on Facebook group. The other 77 publication title that we're working with is with Big John Wagner, producing The Bogeyman, The Incomplete Case Files. Pleasure to work with him on that. That finishes in July, so a few weeks off yet. You can find us. Our own shop is the77comic.net. Go to Facebook for our socials, the 77, big group, lots of chats. And we have the 77 to 2000 AD for any retro 2000 AD stuff that we spent a lot of time talking tonight about as well. And Andy's all over those as well. And you'll see his exclusive artwork and offers through there as well. I'm sure he'll tell you about Familia as well.
Thank you. If you're looking for our podcast, we have, this is MarkWHO77, but we also have a radio show and podcast called MarkWHO42. We can be heard weekly and a few repeats throughout the week. Listen to us on Subspace Radio Network, which is www.subspace.radio, or you can find extended versions of our radio show. Go to MarkWHO42.com. It's all there. And now that I got that out of the way, I want to thank Andy Sawyers for coming on the show. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. I've been listening to the show for a while now, so
and you still came on anyway.
And you still came on, right?
I love it. It's a great show. It's got a lot of heart. It's a warm-hearted show. Long may it continue. I think you guys are great. So thank you. Thank
you. And speaking of our radio show and the 77 together, Ben, we have a show coming up. It's not next week. It's the week after with a certain writer and artist.
Yeah, John Wagner, Robin Smith. Absolutely, we'll be talking about the Bogeyman. And I think as we go week by week, we can drop the other exclusive guests that we've got. We'll be discussing that as well.
Okay. Thank you all for listening to and watching MarkWHO77. We're going to be on, you're already watching it, so you know we're already on the YouTube channel for the 77 Publications. We are going to be doing a show. It'll come out, I don't know, weekly or bi-weekly, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I want to thank Andy Sawyers for coming on the show. We hope you enjoyed this simulcast of MarkWHO77. I'm myself, Mark Baumgarten, my co-host, Vicky Jakubowski, and editor-in-chief of the 77 Publications, Ben Cullis. Had fun interviewing Andrew Sawyers. Until next time, folks, we'll see ya and stay lucky. Thanks for listening to MarkWHO42's Universe, featuring Mark Baumgarten, Eduardo M. Fryer, Vicky Jakubowski, and Zion Kuros. This show was produced and directed by Mark Baumgarten. If you'd like to get in touch with us, go to our Facebook page or email us at MarkWHO77universe@gmail.com. Our radio show airs weekly on Subspace Radio Network at www.subspace.radio and on iHeartRadio. You can listen to our old shows at our website, MarkWHO42.com, and many podcast platforms such as iTunes, Audible, and Pandora. And if you want to hear shows dating back to 2012 with over 150 celebrity interviews, try our YouTube page, MarkWHO42. MarkWHO42's Universe, copyrighted 2023.